Good evening and welcome. You're watching Digital Live on India Today. I'm Pooja Shali. Just yesterday, when I was interacting with you, I had wrapped up that discussion by saying that let's hope I do not return in the next few days to talk about another killing in Kashmir Valley, but sadly I am. Vijay Kumar, 27-year-old resident of Rajasthan, working in Kashmir as a bank manager. Like any Indian, family in one state opting to work in another seems a very normal scenario. Not when you're working in Kashmir. He was not just 27 years old, which means he was a young man. Vijay Kumar got married just 3 months ago. His wife is presently in the Kashmir Valley, was staying with him. Imagine her horror to be told that the husband who left for his duty at the bank, a harmless, non-political man working at his job, has been shot dead inside the bank because he was from the Hindu religion. I have this list with me in my hand, 16 targeted killings at least from the month of October till now. 8 months, 8 specific targeted killings of Hindu men and women, remaining because they were trying to either speak against terrorism and radicalization in Kashmir or just becoming a threat in some way to the Pakistan-backed plan of terrorism which is expanding its fangs in the Kashmir Valley. I'll take a quick read so you know when we talk about 16 targeted killings, we are talking about 16 devastated families, orphaned children, elderly parents in shock, most of them, almost all of them, harmless, innocent, non-political, just going about living their life. Makhanlal Bindru, Kashmiri Pandit pharmacy owner, killed in Srinagar at his shop. Supinder Kaur, Sikh community teacher, killed with Deepak Chand, another Hindu teacher, killed in Kashmir in October 2021. Rakesh Pandita, Ajay Bharti Pandita, both Kashmiri Hindus killed. Rajni Bala, just about 3 days ago on 31st May, a school teacher imparting education to Kashmiri children, giving them knowledge, making them curious about life, perhaps bringing a good next generation of Kashmiris who could hope for a better future, shot dead by radicalized men in Kashmir. Ranjit Singh, a Jammu resident again, just like Rajni Bala, but working as a wine shopkeeper in Baramulla, killed in his shop because he was a shopkeeper of a wine shop, which some did not like. Rahul Bhatt, the Kashmiri Pandit employee under the Prime Minister's package, killed in Budgam. Satish, in April, a driver, Satish Singh, shot dead. Virinder Paswan, a hawker selling golgappas. Who doesn't love golgappas? Well, clearly some terrorists do not. The fact that he was coming all the way from another state, selling golgappas, trying to earn his livelihood in Kashmir, not accepted to the terrorists. Arbind Sa, similar nature, a hawker in Kashmir, killed and shot dead. Remember, not random killings, not isolated killings. These are targeted killings. It's a pattern. It's a pattern to send out a message of who is not welcome in the Kashmir Valley. Devraj, a railway police constable, was sipping a cup of tea at a shop in Pulwama when he was killed. Now, all of these, the names that I've just read, are Hindus, which means they are deliberately targeted for their faith. But if you thought that's the only case, that's not correct either. Saifullah Qadri, killed on 24th May in front of his daughter. Amarina Bhatt, television actor, a Muslim woman making an identity of her own, just harmlessly singing and uploading songs, killed. Sagir Ahmad, Riaz Ahmad Thokar, Ghulam Esandar, police constable. Sagir Ahmed, in fact, was a carpenter, killed. Muhammad Yaqub, who was a punch in one of the villages, killed. 16 targeted killings, 8 killings specifically in 1 month. 4 out of these 8 were of Hindus. Now, why are these targeted killings taking place? Important to understand. Let me share some pointers for you to figure out why is this so rampant suddenly. 1. To show the government at the center and the armed forces in a negative or a poor light. What does that mean? A government that has come across as a government that will not be appeasing the separatists and the terrorists anymore. It will be very direct with its policy. It will neutralize the terrorists. It will give them an opportunity to surrender, but nothing more. Because in the past, for example, when Yasin Malik and others were given an opportunity, they misused that trust of the governments and of the Indian citizens to brainwash the next generation. They called themselves Gandhians, and Gandhians who are now following a struggle. That's not correct. They were actually radicalizing the next generation, and sadly, many Indians fell for that propaganda of Yasin Malik and promoted it. This government says not anymore, and that has definitely frustrated the terror groups of not getting that opportunity from the government. Against peace, secularism, diversity. Against peace, clearly for anyone, whether it is Mudassir Sheikh, who was killed by the terrorists in a gunfight. What was Mudassir Sheikh doing? His plan was to keep Kashmir safe and secular. Against peace, secularism, diversity. Why did I use the word diversity here? Laborers, Hindu employees, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar residents, a Sikh teacher, non-local residents, local residents. So apart from being from a specific religion, if anyone trying to speak against terrorism, radicalization, as we all should, will be shot dead. Now, anyone apart from this, if you're representing the idea of India, which means a secular, diverse, democratic nation where everyone is treated as equal, or at least there's a struggle to ensure that everyone gets to be treated as equal, not accepted to the terror groups funded by Pakistan. They have a certain idea of how Kashmir should become. Talibanized, Islamicized, and extremely radicalized area. That's what they want. Remember that. So thereby, there are attempts clearly to radicalize the young generation, and that is what needs to be stopped. We need to ensure that the young men and women do not take the same route that has been taken previously. And because that radicalization is working to some extent, that brings me to the next point. Unlike bigger terror groups earlier, now there is an easy access to small arms and small weapons. So what you see, the recent targeted killings are not by assault rifles like AK-47. Whether it is in Kulgam, whether it is in Budgam, all these targeted killings are being done by little pistols. Vijay Kumar's video, the CCTV footage of the bank, if you see clearly, a man walks in, takes out a small weapon that it is in his bag. He's wearing a mask. He turns around. He knows where Vijay Kumar is sitting, where the bank manager is sitting, and shoots him dead. Who is telling these men who is the bank manager, what time does he come, when is the bank comparatively empty so that others are not injured but the man is shot dead, that he's of a certain religion, has a certain name? It is a network and a nexus. And all of this, remember, is sadly a plot by Pakistan to create chaos and unrest. And if that becomes successful in Kashmir, it will hamper not only Kashmiris, it will hamper the entire subcontinent. Look at what Pakistan and Afghanistan have become today. We should not in any way let our Kashmir turn into that similar dark hole. But of course, the question will be put to the government. The elected government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, they have been elected for a reason. The reason that they gave us hope that Kashmir can change, that India can change. And with these targeted killings, that direct questions will be put to the Prime Minister, to the Home Minister, and to the government at the center, to the bureaucracy. Here are some of the 5 questions that I think need to be asked, must be asked, and I'll be asking now. Where is Naya Kashmir? That was the promise specifically after the abrogation of Article 370. Now remember, Article 370, I will tell you as a reporter on the ground who was there then, who's been speaking to Kashmiri pundits, who's been in touch about the ground situation. Article 370 would have never immediately resolved the crisis or the conflict. That was never the immediate change. But it was a political will that appeared to be coming from the government, to be ensuring that the terrorists do not easily get away. And therefore, the cases are being filed, investigating agencies are after them. The ecosystem funding has been frozen. That was a start. But eventually, if the people are, innocent people are being killed, what's the worth? So where is Naya Kashmir really? What is the strategy about that? Why have targeted killings returned in the valley? That is an important question because the life lost is leaving behind shocked, devastated families. What plan to allay the fear of the Kashmiri Hindus, the Kashmiri Pandits, who've been protesting now for over 20 days after the death of Rahul Bhatt? Now, they're demanding relocation to Jammu, and I can tell you my sources in the government have said relocation to Jammu will not be an option because it could be seen as a victory of the terrorists. But within district headquarters, the government has announced they can be transferred. Now, Kashmiri Pandits clearly feel the fear because of the targeted killings of their colleagues, their neighbors, and they are not willing to take that chance, and they are prepared to leave. The government agencies, the police is urging them to stay back, but it's understandable that the fear that they are facing at this point, they are living in transit accommodations. Now, these are employees specifically who are working in Kashmir. Their families had to flee to Jammu in the 1990s. What has the government done? Why has the Prime Minister not visited some of the refugee camps in Jammu? Why has the Home Minister not given out a very strong statement to allay those fears of the minority community? Remember, currently in the Kashmir Valley, which is predominantly Muslim dominated, about 95% Muslim community, there are less than 2% Hindus living in Kashmir as residents. And when I say less than 2%, it can even be lower than that. In some villages, there's just one Hindu family. So understand the fear that is coming across to them. And that is why I think the solidarity, the support to them needs to be much more via journalists, activists, the administration, and the narrative. That should not be for the terrorists, but for the victims. How will the government stop the terror ecosystem? Like I just told you earlier, small arms are being distributed. And that is helping with the radicalization, with the killings. And that ecosystem needs to be nipped in the bud by the government. And if they don't do it as soon as possible, that will become a problem. Now, the final question will be to the government, what happened to the de-radicalization mission? Strong word there, but it's important. Remember, the government is very clear with its policy. And as you have noticed in the past few days, every time a civilian is killed by the terrorists, the government and the armed forces, the police, the army, and other security forces are ensuring that the terrorists are killed right away in the next 3-4 days, in a week, in a month. The terrorists are being neutralized. But there are also fresh terrorists coming up. And that is where the de-radicalization mission, the outreach will be of utmost significance. We have to ensure that we do not give that opportunity or a chance to anyone to take that route. And that is where the society part comes in. The society will have to ensure that one, they do not give in to the terrorists, they stand up against them, the ones who can. Only they can stop eventually what is happening. Society will improve only when people speak up. The human chain is required today for the Hindus, for anyone fighting terrorism in Kashmir, for anyone who's just working in Kashmir for their livelihood. We are at the cusp of a turn of an important change. Either Kashmir will become again the paradise that it has been, and people are trying to ensure that that happens, but it's also at the cusp that it could go how Afghanistan or Pakistan is, and none of us want that, not the Kashmiris, not people in the rest of India. And that is why today is your moment to speak up, to protest, to write, to agitate, to document. You may not be there in the 1990s, don't let 1990s happen today. It is our job to stand up. And I say this because I know in the past few years how deliberately the accounts that were happening, for example, these targeted killings, were not reported, were not documented, were not talked about, were not encouraged. Terrorists were empathized with, justified about. There were all sorts of excuses given that they could be participating in a class struggle or are revolutionaries. Don't do that today. Outreach is important, de-radicalization is important, but it's also important to be ensured that we stand together and united against terrorism in the Kashmir Valley, as Kashmiris, as Indians, as human beings. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. You can always stay tuned to